All right, so for today, this is for Thursday the 31st and then Friday the 1st of April. So what this is going to do is we're going to go back to what we did with drawing our favorite place or a happy place for us and just kind of going back to that in our sandbox. If you don't have your sandbox and you know you did this, then that's fine. If you didn't do this, make sure you go back to the previous one on the absent document. But what we're going to do is we're going to look at 3841 Bordeaux. I did read this in class, and we did annotate, but we did not write to it yet. So this is what you're going to do for me today with this particular mentor text. I want you to notice how in this 3841, that's the address, that's just the house number and the street. And so you can put your own house number and street underneath. And what you're going to do is you're going to imitate what this author did. And what they ended up doing was they said always, and they added things that always happen at that place that helped to make that a memory, to help it make it be such a comfort to be. So always curl up worms on the sidewalk after it rained. Always the comforting weekend sound of the Cubs game. Always my dad's bottom drawer of neatly folded white undershirts. Always Hollies with the uncles. Always reading cereal box while we ate breakfast. Always being in my room. Always my dad whistling and dressed nicely. Always getting into bed and feeling the cold underside of the pillow. Always the late night lullaby of ice knocking against my parents' water glasses as they came upstairs. So what I'm wanting you to do is I want you to come up with at least 5 always for your happy place. That could be the place that you drew in your sandbox, or it could just be something that's a different place. Either one is fine. So here's some of my examples. I said always waking up to the smell of coffee, always the sound of kids shows in the background on Saturday morning, always bikes left in the yard in summer, always Caleb playing in the background throughout the house. There's a lot of things that we could put there. So I want you to come up with at least 5 always as statements, and I'm going to have you email that to me. So let me show you really quickly what I would like for you to do. Let me pull this up really quickly. So with your email, you can title it always if you want. And you're going to type at least 5, oh gosh, oh my goodness gracious, at least 5 always statements about your happy place. So whatever that is for you, just at least 5 things that always happen there, okay? And you're going to email that to me. All right, when you get done doing that, I'm going to have you, we're going to move on to the next thing. So you can email me that, or you can just have that email draft open, and you can attach the other things that I'm going to need from you here in the next part of this video, okay? All right, so that email is what I'm looking for to end that particular portion. All right, the next thing, what we're going to do is you're actually going to have your resource notebook. If you don't have your resource notebook, you're just going to write this on a separate sheet of paper. Earlier in the year, we did fiction signposts. So I'm going to remind you about what these are. Fiction signposts are places within reading that you need to stop and think about why the author did that. So to refresh your memory on that, one of them that we did that you guys liked a lot was the Again and Again. That was Destiny with the clocks, where the guy kept getting hit by a bus, and that was a little Pixar-type short film. The other one that you guys really liked was Snack Attack. It was a memory moment. It was when the old lady and her snacks, how she wanted to eat her snacks by herself, and she ended up realizing that she was eating the young man's snacks, not the other way around. So those are just places within reading that you need to stop and figure out and think about why that's the case, okay? Which is what we're going to do today, but it's going to be with nonfiction. So nonfiction signposts. Now, Mrs. Othout, her class for today and tomorrow is also doing this. So however you end up doing it is fine. I'm going to let you know kind of the 2 ways that it has been written before. Mrs. Othout and I, we've kind of written our numbers like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so you could do it that way. And then underneath, you can actually label them. Oops, sorry. You can label them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can do it that way. Or if you wanted to, you could draw boxes. And it doesn't matter which way you choose. Okay, so you could do it this way. And you could have your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. However you choose to do it is perfectly fine. Just pick one of those ways, whichever one works for you. And we're going to go through some examples on what those 5 different signposts are. For me, I'm going to do the first 3, and then with Mrs. Othat, she's going to do number 4 and 5. So what I'm going to ask that you do is that you get a separate sheet of paper, because I am going to have you write these down. And then at the end, you'll take a picture of yours and attach them to that email that you already have open, or you can send me a second email. Either one is fine. All right, so I'm going to show you where you can access all of this. What you're going to do is you can go into the Congress Explorers Reading and Writing course, and you can click on the one that says Notes and Classroom Practice Examples. It's the gray folder, and it says right here Nonfiction Signposts. You can click on that, and I'm going to go through a couple of these with you, okay? So this is Contrasts and Contradictions, and what you're going to notice with this is that it's when there's opposing ideas. It's when there's a difference between what you know and what the writer is saying. For example, your world versus the world presented in the piece, your background knowledge, and what the piece is saying. When you come across an idea that is like, whoa, that doesn't seem right, you want to ask yourself, what is the contrast or contradiction, and why does this matter? How is it going to push you as a thinker, as a learner, that kind of thing? Okay, so that's one thing you're going to look at. And I'm going to have you look at a couple of these, and you're actually going to come back. Oops, sorry. You're going to come back and you're going to watch these yourself. So go to this link if you haven't gotten there yet. And the 2 that I want you to watch, the one right here, it says Blind Pole Vaulter, and then the other one is Susan Boyle. So I'm going to have you watch both of those and then come back and see me. So go ahead and pause and do that, and then you can come back and we'll write some stuff down. All right, so at this point, you should have watched Blind Pole Vaulter and Susan Boyle. And essentially, the blind pole vaulter, even in its name, is something, and you can write this down as I'm talking. So Susan Boyle, I'm going to cover this up so you can see what you're writing. So the blind pole vaulter is just so interesting because in the actual name itself, it's contradicting. You're like, a pole vaulter, well, I know what that is, but this person who's blind, like, it seems kind of impossible, but she did it, so she can't overcome that battle. So that contrast and contradiction. Susan Boyle, as she first walked out on the stage, everyone was kind of laughing at her because she was a little quirky. And then she started singing, and everyone changed their opinion of what was happening in front of them. So both of those are contrast and contradiction. It did not come out the way that you thought it would, and it kind of surprised you. And so why does that matter? Like, how is that? It's like, don't judge a book by its cover. You're learning things. You're applying things to your life, that kind of thing. Okay? All right, so we had those 2. Then we're going to go back to this, and you also have access to it. The next one is extreme or absolute language. What you're going to notice here is that the author is using language that leaves no doubt. It exaggerates. It gets pushed to the limit. So, for instance, if you had dinner one night, you're like, oh, this is the worst meal ever. It's not actually the worst meal, but you're pushing it to the limit of, like, you're trying to get across that it's not a very good meal. Or maybe this is the best vacation ever. And at this moment in time, yeah, it just means that you're like, this is a great vacation. It may not be the best because there may be something that's better at another time. So you want to ask yourself, why does the author use this language? Why say it like that? So it goes through that kind of thing. Okay. The one that I'm going to have you guys look at, and actually I can pull it up and talk with you with it, is I Am Still the Greatest. This is from Muhammad Ali. He was a boxer, and he really was a really good boxer. And so this one is kind of interesting to me because he has so much confidence in himself, and like using the word greatest, it does have that like a big ego type thing, but he like kind of lived up to it. And looking back here too, is like, why do they say it like that? Are they trying to, is language innocent, or are they trying to prove a point? Is the author misleading? So we kind of have to make sure, like, when we see those things, we need to do our own research on it to make sure that whatever is being said is accurate in your own brain. Okay, so I Am Still the Greatest. I'm going to read a couple of things about him. I'll just read these 2 paragraphs for you, but it's kind of interesting. So it says, I always believed in myself, even as a young child growing up in Louisville, Kentucky. My parents instilled a sense of pride and confidence in me and taught me and my brother that we could be the best at anything. I must have believed them because I remember being the neighborhood marble champion and challenging my neighborhood buddies to see who could jump the tallest hedges or run a foot race the length of the block. Of course, I knew when I made the challenge that I would win. I never even thought of losing. In high school, I boasted weekly, if not daily, that one day I was going to be the heavyweight champion of the world. As part of my boxing training, I would run down 4th Street in downtown Louisville, darting in and out of local shops, taking out just enough to tell them I was training for the Olympics and I was going to win a gold medal. And when I came back home, I was going to turn pro and become the world heavyweight champion in boxing. I never thought of the possibility of failing, only the fame and glory I was going to get when I won. I could see it. I could almost feel it. When I proclaimed that I was the greatest of all time, I believed in myself, and I still do. So there's a lot of confidence here, but the fact that he's able to back up how he became the greatest and the things that he was able to accomplish, it goes back to kind of seeing, well, yeah, I mean, I don't think it's misleading. I think he is trying to prove a point, okay? So on your same piece of paper that you're working with, you're going to go ahead and write that in there, extreme or absolute language, Muhammad Ali, I am the greatest, and have that written down. Okay, that's the only one we're going to do for that particular one right now. The last one that you're going to do with me is number 3. It is, and again, if you need to pause at any point, please pause, and you can just hit play again. But the last one you're going to do with me is numbers and stats. And this is interesting because it has authors use exact numbers, and they do that for a reason. They try to help you to visualize the author's point. Now, sometimes they won't use exact numbers. Sometimes they will use a relative amount. The example I use in class is I could say, hey, I went to this basketball game and there were a lot of people there. That doesn't really give me any information. I can't really visualize. I don't know what type of basketball game. Was it a game that was here at Congress? Was it a game that was at the Sprint Center? I don't know. I'm just saying a lot of people. The word a lot means different to different people. So using exact numbers can help the author to visualize points. So if I said my sentence a little bit different, I could say I went to this basketball game. There were over 20,000 people. That gives you a more visualization, and it also tells you that that game was not at Congress. It had to be a bigger facility. So it gives you that visualization. But when you see these numbers, or even if you see relative amounts, you want to ask yourself, why those numbers? Why this amount? Is there a place where an author could have used the exact number or amount but chose to use a relative amount instead? And why might this be? So we talked about in class how they can say majority rule. So the majority of the people voted on this. They could say just the word majority. Or they could use that percentage. 75% people chose this. Sometimes you don't want to use the word majority, or you do want to use the word majority, because sometimes the majority could just be 51%, which is not totally it's not a lot of difference between 49%. So using either the exact or relative amount can kind of change the way the person feels about that particular topic, whatever they're talking about. Okay. So there's 2 on here that I'm going to have you look at as well. The first one that I'm going to have you click on and listen to is the earbuds one. So can earbuds cause hearing loss? So I'm going to have you click on that and watch it. The second one you're going to watch is Are Athletes Getting Bigger, Stronger? It's a TED Talk. You only need to watch till about, about 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So don't watch any longer than that because it's a pretty longer one. So you don't need to watch the whole thing. Watch from the beginning to about 2 minutes and 30 seconds. That's all you really need to watch. Okay? So yeah, watch those 2 things and then come back and we're going to take some notes on those. All right, so you should have watched the earbuds one and the TED Talk on athletes getting bigger and stronger. And what you're going to do with that, you're going to write these 2 things down. On both of them, they use exact numbers, and those exact numbers were really important to that. So the earbuds one, the hearing loss, they talked about how 85 decibels is when hearing loss starts, or when that happens. And they were giving examples of all different things that we see and use in the real world that were higher than 85. And so using that specific number allows people to kind of really understand what's happening. Because if they were just to say, well, yeah, using earbuds, it really does damage your ears and your hearing loss. So try not to listen to music very loudly. Like if they were to say it that way, it doesn't have quite the impact. The other one, the TED Talk, Bolt versus Owen, this was interesting because what they were saying is the specific numbers, in the track world, and especially the 100-meter dash, having the 10.2 seconds versus the 9.77 seconds it's not a very big difference, but it is in the track world. So what they're saying is if Owen would have had the same equipment and the same track that Bolt did, that he would have been at basically the same speed that Bolt ran. So having those specific numbers really allowed us to understand that. It's not just saying, well, yeah, Bolt and Owen were just about the same. This kind of explains it, gives us that exactness to it. Talks about the technology and the equipment that has been used since 1936 to basically now. So, all right. So make sure you, on a separate sheet of paper, took these notes. What I want you to do is I want you to take a picture of that and show me that you did it. You're going to send it to me in that same email that you had for the email of the always things, or it could be a separate email. It doesn't matter. But I am going to look for those two things, and if I don't get those two things, it's going to go into missing. So make sure you get those to me. All right, that's all I have for you. Thanks.